twin sons of Xyrus beat down like molten hammers on the cracked dunes of the shattered wastes, baking the sand into glassy shards that glittered like broken promises. Smoke coiled from the smoldering wreckage of a downed dropship, its hull split open like a gutted beast, and the acrid stench of ionized metal mixed with the coppery tang of blood. Commander Joran Vale stood at the edge of the crater, his boots sinking slightly into the scorched earth, his breath ragged beneath the cracked visor of his helmet. His squad was gone. Scattered, dead, or captured, and he'd barely escaped the ambush that had turned their routine reconnaissance into a slaughter. Now, alone and low on ammo, he scanned the dunes for movement, his pulse rifle tight in his grip, his eyes scanning the heat-haze shimmer for threats. He hadn't expected to find her. She lay half-buried in the lee of a blackened ridge, one arm twisted unnaturally beneath her, the other clutching a fractured energy blade. Her skin was the deep cerulean of twilight oceans, dusted with fine silver particles that caught the light like stars. Her hair, long and wild, was the color of spun gold, tangled with ash and dried blood. Even unconscious, she radiated danger. The sharp angles of her face, the lean muscle coiled beneath torn battle armor, the faint hum of residual energy still clinging to her like static. She was unmistakably Varelian, one of the warrior caste known across the quadrant for their ferocity, their honor-bound duels, and their utter disdain for offworlders, especially humans, whom they considered little more than scavengers with guns. Joran should have walked away. Protocol demanded it. The Varelians weren't allies. They were neutral at best, hostile at worst. And this one, she'd gut him the moment she woke if she saw him hovering over her like some lost puppy. But something stayed his hand. Maybe it was the way her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven bursts. Maybe it was the jagged wound across her ribs, already crusted black with dried plasma burns. Or maybe it was the memory of his sister, bleeding out on a moon far from home, waiting for help that never came. Cursing under his breath, Joran knelt. He set his rifle aside, pulled a medkit from his belt, and got to work. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic foam, applied a biosealant patch, and stabilized her arm with a makeshift splint fashioned from a piece of his own armor plating. All the while, he kept glancing over his shoulder, ears straining for the telltale whine of enemy drones or the crunch of boots on sand. Time stretched like taffy. Sweat dripped into his eyes. His hands trembled, not from fear, but exhaustion. Then, without warning, her eyes snapped open. They were the color of storm-churned ice, pale, piercing, and utterly devoid of mercy. Before Joran could react, she moved. In one fluid motion, she rolled, seized his wrist in a grip that felt like iron wrapped in silk, and twisted him onto his back with terrifying ease. Her knee pinned his chest. Her free hand hovered inches from his throat, fingers curled like talons, glowing faintly with bioluminescent energy. Up close, he could see the flecks of gold in her irises, the delicate tracery of silver scars along her jawline, the way her breath hitched as pain flared through her injured side. "Touch me once?" she hissed, voice low and sharp as shattered glass. "And I won't spare you, human." Joran didn't move, didn't blink. He just stared up at her, heart hammering against his ribs, and said the only thing that came to mind. "I already did." For a heartbeat, she looked confused. Then her gaze dropped to the fresh sealant on her ribs, the splint on her arm, the discarded medkit beside them. Her expression flickered. Surprise, suspicion, then something deeper, harder to name. Slowly, reluctantly, she eased the pressure on his chest. But she didn't let go. "You patched me," she said, not as a question, but as an accusation. "I did," Joran replied, voice steady despite the dryness in his throat. "You were dying." "I do not die so easily," she snapped, though her breathing betrayed her. "And I do not accept charity from humans." "It wasn't charity," he said, meeting her eyes. "It was basic decency. Something your people might want to try sometime." A flicker of something, amusement, irritation, crossed her features. "Bold words for a man beneath my knee. Bold enough to save your life," he countered. "Now, are you going to kill me? Or can we talk like civilized beings?" She studied him for a long moment, her golden brows furrowed. Then, with a sigh that sounded more like a growl, she pushed herself upright, wincing as she did. She staggered to her feet, swaying slightly, and retrieved her broken blade. "My name is Lyra," she said, not looking at him. "Warrior of the Azure Fong." "And you?" "Commander Joran Vale, Terran Expeditionary Force." "Vale," she repeated, testing the sound. Like a valley, a place where things fall and are forgotten. Or where rivers gather and life begins. He shot back, rising slowly. Depends on your perspective. That earned him a sideways glance, sharp, assessing, but not entirely hostile. You speak like a poet, not a soldier. I read a lot, he said with a shrug. Keeps the mind sharp when you're stuck in a tin can for 6 months. Lyra snorted, a surprisingly human sound, and turned toward the horizon. The battle rages beyond the dune ridge. My sisters are fighting. I must return. You can barely stand, Joran pointed out, and that wound will reopen if you run. I have no choice, she said, voice hardening. Honor demands it. Honor won't stop you from bleeding out mid-charge, he retorted. Let me help. She whirled on him, eyes blazing. Why? Why would a human risk himself for a Varelian? We are not your kin. We do not share your gods, your customs, your soft hearts. Maybe because I'm tired of watching people die when they don't have to, Joran said quietly. Maybe because I've seen enough war to know that enemies today can be allies tomorrow, if someone's willing to make the first move. Lyra stared at him, her expression unreadable. The wind kicked up sand around them, swirling in lazy spirals. Somewhere in the distance, the thunder of artillery rolled like a storm. Finally, she nodded, once curt but unmistakable. Fine. But if you betray me, I will peel the skin from your bones and wear it as a cloak. Noted, Joran said, suppressing a grin. Try not to faint on the way. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows of the dunes, using the wreckage of fallen war machines as cover. Joran kept pace with her, rifle ready, scanning for threats. Lyra, despite her injury, moved with predatory grace, every step deliberate, every breath controlled. She knew the terrain like the lines on her palms, leading them through narrow gullies and past hidden sniper nests with uncanny precision. Halfway to the front lines, they stumbled upon a Varelian scout team, 3 warriors, all female, all wounded, pinned down by a pair of automated sentry drones. The drones hovered like metallic vultures, firing precise bursts of plasma that chewed through rock and flesh alike. The Varelians were running low on ammo, their shields flickering. Lyra didn't hesitate. She raised her broken blade, and though it couldn't fire, she used it to reflect the sun's glare directly into the lead drone's sensor array. Stuttered, disoriented. Joran took the opening, firing 2 clean shots that blew the drones apart in showers of sparks. The Varelian scouts stared at them. First at Lyra, then at Joran, their expressions a mix of shock and suspicion. One of them, a broad-shouldered woman with violet tattoos across her cheeks, stepped forward. Lyra? You live. Barely? Lyra said, grimacing as she leaned against a boulder. This human saved me. The tattooed warrior's eyes narrowed. A human? Here? With you? He is not our enemy, Lyra said firmly. Not today. The others exchanged glances but said nothing. They helped Lyra sit, offering her a canteen of water infused with healing herbs. Joran hung back, keeping watch, feeling the weight of their stares. He didn't belong here. He knew that. But he also knew that sometimes, belonging wasn't about blood or species, it was about choices. As night fell, the twin suns dipping below the horizon in a blaze of crimson and gold, the Varelians set up a temporary camp in a shallow cave. Lyra's fever spiked, her skin burning hot to the touch. Joran sat beside her, pressing a cool compress to her forehead, murmuring reassurances in a voice so low only she could hear. You're stubborn, she whispered, her eyes half-lidded, and reckless, and far too kind for a soldier. And you're bossy, he replied, sarcastic and terrible at accepting help. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Perhaps we are both fools. Perhaps, he agreed. Outside, the desert cooled rapidly, the stars emerging like scattered diamonds. The sounds of distant battle faded, replaced by the whisper of wind through stone. For the first time in weeks, Joran felt something other than dread. He felt possibility. In the days that followed, an uneasy alliance formed. The Varelians, led by Lyra and her second-in-command, Kales, the tattooed warrior, began coordinating with Joran's surviving unit, what was left of them. Anyway, they shared intel, pooled resources, and fought side by side against the true enemy. The Cathar Dominion, a ruthless empire that sought to enslave every sentient being in the sector. Slowly, grudgingly, trust grew. Joran taught them Terran tactics. They taught him Varelian survival techniques. He learned to brew their bitter root tea. They laughed at his clumsy attempts to pronounce their names. And through it all, Lyra watched him. Not with suspicion anymore, but with something softer, something curious. She'd catch him staring at the stars, or humming old Earth songs under his breath, or sharing his rations with a wounded Varelian child they'd rescued from a bombed-out village. Each time, she'd look away quickly, but not before he saw the flicker in her eyes. One evening, as they stood atop a dune overlooking the encampment, Lyra turned to him. "Why do you fight?" she asked, her voice quiet. Joran considered the question. "To protect people," he said finally. "Even the ones who hate me." She was silent for a long time. Then, softly, "My people believe strength is the only truth, that compassion is weakness. But you are strong because you care. That is strange to me. Beautiful, even." Joran's breath caught. He didn't know what to say. Before he could respond, alarms blared across the camp. Scouts reported a massive Cthar assault force moving in, tanks, walkers, aerial drones. The final push. "We cannot hold them," Kaylee said grimly, gathering the warriors. "We must retreat." "No," Lyra said, stepping forward. "We make our stand here. This is our home. We do not run." "But we're outnumbered 10-1, another warrior cried. "Then we fight smarter," Joran said, pulling up a holographic map. "There's a canyon 2 clicks east. Narrow entrance, high walls. Perfect for an ambush. We lure them in, collapse the entrance behind them, trap them inside." Lyra studied the map, then nodded. It could work, but someone must draw them in. "I'll do it," Joran said. "No," Lyra said immediately. "Too dangerous," says the woman who charged a plasma turret with a broken sword. He shot back. She glared at him, but there was no real heat in it. "Fine, but I go with you." And so they did. The plan unfolded like a deadly dance. Joran and Lyra raced across the open desert in a stolen skimmer, drawing the Cthar forces like moths to flame. Behind them, the Varelians and Terrans laid charges along the canyon walls. The Cthar took the bait, roaring after them in a cloud of dust and fury. Just as they reached the canyon mouth, Lyra's skimmer sputtered and died. "Out of fuel," she shouted. "Then we run." Joran grabbed her hand, and they sprinted into the narrow pass. Plasma bolts screamed past them, chipping stone, scorching sand. They dove behind a boulder as the last of the Cthar vehicles entered the canyon. "Now!" Joran yelled into his comm. The charges detonated with a deafening roar. The canyon entrance collapsed in a mountain of rock and dust, sealing the Cthar inside. Cheers erupted from the ridgeline above. But their victory was short-lived. From the smoke emerged a towering Cthar warlord, 7 feet tall, armored in black carapace, wielding a gravity hammer that warped the air around it. He spotted Joran and Lyra and charged. "Go!" Lyra shoved Joran toward the escape route. "I'll hold him." "Like hell." Joran fired his rifle, but the bolts bounced harmlessly off the warlord's armor. The warlord swung his hammer. Lyra leapt, dodging the crushing blow, but the shockwave sent her flying. She hit the ground hard, her wound reopening. Blood seeped through her armor. Rage surged through Joran. He dropped his rifle, drew his combat knife, and ran straight at the warlord. "Joran, no!" Lyra screamed, but it was too late. Just as the hammer came down, Lyra threw her broken blade like a spear. It struck the warlord's knee joint, staggering him. Joran dove beneath the swing, drove his knife into a seam in the armor, and twisted. The warlord roared, stumbling backward, right into the unstable wall. With a groan of shifting stone, the entire cliffside gave way, burying him in rubble. Silence fell. Joran crawled to Lyra, cradling her in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, her skin pale beneath the blue. "You idiot," she whispered, blood staining her lips. "You could have died." "So could you," he said, voice thick. "But I'm not letting you go. Not yet." Tears welled in her storm-colored eyes. "Why do you care so much?" "Because," he said, brushing a strand of golden hair from her face. "You're worth caring about." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached up, her fingers trembling, and touched his cheek. "Then stay," she whispered. "Stay with me." And in that moment, beneath the alien stars, surrounded by the ruins of war, Joran knew he would. Not just for now, but for always. The dust settled like a shroud over the canyon. But peace was a luxury neither Joran nor Lyra could afford. As Varelian medics rushed to stabilize her, Kaylee's knelt beside Joran, her violet tattoos stark against the firelight of emergency flares. "She's lost too much blood," she said grimly. "Our healers say only the heart bloom of the glass wastes can close such wounds now, and it blooms once every 10 cycles. Joran's stomach dropped. The glass wastes lay beyond the scorched divide, a region crawling with Cthar patrols and worse. Rumors spoke of ancient war machines buried beneath the sands, awakened by the recent bombardments. "How long does she have?" he asked, voice tight. 3 sunrises, Kaylee's replied. "Maybe less." Without another word, Joran stood, slung his rifle, and began checking his gear. Kaylee's grabbed his arm. "You can't go alone. The wastes are death." "I don't have a choice," he said, meeting her eyes. "If I don't bring back that flower, she dies." Kaylee studied him for a long moment, then released his arm with a slow nod. "Then you won't go alone." She turned and barked orders. Within minutes, a small strike team assembled. 4 Varelian warriors, hardened and silent, their armor patched but their eyes sharp. Among them was a young scout named Tayla, barely out of warrior training, who carried a relic scanner rumored to detect heartbloom energy signatures. They left at dawn. The journey was brutal. The scorched divide lived up to its name, a furnace of shifting dunes and razor-sharp silica storms that scoured flesh from bone. They moved under cover of darkness, navigating by star charts etched into Tayla's forearm. On the second night, they stumbled upon a derelict Cthar outpost, its walls scorched black. Inside, they found something unexpected: human corpses. Not Terran soldiers, colonists. Civilians, women, children, all executed with surgical precision. Joran recognized the insignia on a torn jacket. New Carthage settlement. His sister's colony. His hands shook as he knelt beside a small body, clutching a scorched doll. "They were neutral," he whispered, voice raw. "Non-combatants." Tayla scanned the room with her relic device. "This wasn't just an execution," she said quietly. "They were harvesting something. Neural tissue. Biosignatures." Kaylee's frowned. "The Cthar have been experimenting with hybrid warriors, part machine, part organic. But why humans?" A cold dread coiled in Joran's gut. He remembered intel fragments from earlier briefings. Project Chimera. A Cthar initiative to splice resilient human DNA with Varelian combat reflexes. And now, with the war escalating, they needed test subjects. Lots of them, which meant New Carthage wasn't the only one. As they pressed deeper into the wastes, the ground began to hum. Not with wind, but with mechanical resonance. Tayla's scanner spiked. "Something's beneath us," she warned. "Big." Before anyone could react, the sand erupted. A colossal war machine, ancient, rusted but very much alive, rose from the dunes. Its chassis bore the faded sigil of the old Varelian Empire, long thought extinct. But its optics glowed crimson, and its voice boomed in a synthesized snarl. "Intruders. Genetic contaminants. Purge protocol activated." It wasn't just old. It had been reprogrammed by the Cthar. Chaos erupted. Plasma fire lit the night as the team scattered. Joran fired at the machine's joints, but his rounds sparked harmlessly off its armor. Kaylee's hurled a magnetic charge, sticking it to the machine's chest. It detonated, but only cracked the plating. "We can't beat it," Tayla yelled, dragging Joran behind a rock spire. "We don't have to," he panted, eyes scanning the battlefield. Then he saw it. A fracture line along the machine's lower spine, glowing faintly blue. "That's not Cthar tech. That's Varelian. Original design." Tayla's eyes widened. "The heart bloom. It resonates with old Empire biocircuits. If we can get a bloom near it, it might shut down or overload," Joran finished. "But we don't have a bloom yet. We don't need the whole plant," Tayla said, pulling a vial from her belt. "Just its pollen. My scanner detected a dormant patch half a click east. It's not blooming, but if we trigger it." They ran. Behind them, the war machine leveled its cannons. Kaylee's and the others laid down, covering fire, buying precious seconds. Joran and Tayla reached the patch, a cluster of crystalline buds buried beneath glassy soil. Tayla slammed her scanner into the ground, overriding its frequency to mimic a solar flare. The buds trembled, then unfurled in a burst of iridescent blue light. Pollen swirled into the air like living mist. Joran scooped a handful into a containment pod and sprinted back toward the battle. The war machine had pinned Kaylee's beneath a fallen strut, its cannon charging for the final shot. With a roar, Joran hurled the pod straight into the fracture on its spine. The effect was instantaneous. The machine convulsed. Blue veins of energy spiderwebbed across its chassis. Its optics flickered from red to white to blue. Then it collapsed inert. Silence. Then cheers. But Joran didn't celebrate. He knelt beside the fallen heart bloom patch, gathering every petal, every stem. It wasn't enough for a full treatment, but it was something. They returned to camp at sunrise on the third day. Lyra was fading fast. Her skin had taken on a grayish hue, her breath shallow. The healers shook their heads when they saw the partial bloom. It may ease her pain, one said gently, but it won't heal her. Joran refused to accept that. He crushed the petals into a paste, mixed it with his own blood. Terran plasma had regenerative properties, thanks to gene therapy protocols, and pressed it to her wound. For hours, nothing happened. Then, just as the twin suns reached their zenith, Lyra's fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered open. Color returned to her cheeks. The wound began to knit itself closed, glowing faintly blue. The healers stared in awe. Human blood fused with heart bloom? It's never been done. Lyra looked at Joran, tears in her eyes. You gave me your life force. I gave you a chance, he corrected softly. You did the rest. Their reunion was cut short by an urgent summons from the High Command. A transmission had been intercepted, one that changed everything. It wasn't from the Cthar. It was from the Varelian Empress herself. And it declared Lyra a traitor. Why? Joran demanded as they stood before the holographic projection in the command tent. The Empress's image loomed, regal and severe. Her silver hair coiled like a crown, her eyes colder than space. Because she consorted with humans, the Empress intoned. Because she accepted aid from an off-worlder. Because she defied the Blood Edict. No Varelian shall owe life debt to an alien. To do so is to taint the lineage. That's insane. Joran exploded. She was dying. The law is clear, the Empress said, her gaze locking onto Lyra. Return to the capital. Face judgment. Or be branded outcast. Forever severed from your people. Your name erased, your honor void. Lyra stood tall, though her hands trembled. I will not renounce what he did for me. Then you choose exile, the Empress said, and the transmission cut. Silence filled the tent. Kayleigh stepped forward. There's more. The Empress isn't acting alone. Her advisor, Vexer, has been feeding her lies. He's been colluding with the Cthar. That's how they knew about our positions, our supply lines. He's selling us out. Joran's mind raced. So the Empress is being manipulated. And Lyra's being used as a scapegoat to silence dissent. Exactly, Kayleigh said. But if we expose Vexer, we'll need proof. And there's only one place it exists, the Royal Archives beneath the Obsidian Spire. Lyra turned to Joran, her storm-colored eyes blazing with resolve. I have to go back, to my home, to face this. You'll be arrested on sight, he warned. Then I'll go with you, he said without hesitation. She shook her head. It's too dangerous. You're human. They'll execute you on principle. Let them try, he said, offering a crooked smile. Besides, someone's got to keep you from charging headfirst into another war machine. Despite the gravity of the moment, Lyra laughed. A real, warm sound that made Joran's chest ache. You're impossible. And you're worth it, he replied. So they planned. Disguised as desert traders, they crossed the border into the Varelian heartlands, guided by secret routes known only to rebels. The capital city of Jaran rose from the sands like a blade of black crystal, its spires piercing the sky. At its center stood the Obsidian Spire, home of the Empress, and the vault of all Varelian secrets. Infiltration was near suicidal. Every gate was guarded, every alley watched. But Lyra knew the city's underbelly. The forgotten tunnels, the servant passages, the blind spots in the surveillance grid. They slipped through like ghosts. Deep beneath the spire, they found the archives. A cavernous chamber lined with memory crystals, each containing centuries of history. Taylor's scanner led them to a hidden compartment behind a false wall. Inside, data shards implicating Vexer in arms deals with the Cthar, troop movements sold for credits, even plans for a coup. But as Joran pocketed the shards, alarms blared. They'd been betrayed. Vexer himself stood in the doorway, flanked by royal guards. He was tall, gaunt, his skin the color of dried blood, his eyes gleaming with malice. Ah, the traitor and her pet human, he sneered. How touching. You're the real traitor, Lyra spat. Traitor, Vexer laughed. I'm saving our people. The Cthar promised us dominance if we purge the weak, the sentimental, the human lovers. He gestured to Joran. Kill him. Bring her to the Empress. The guards advanced. Joran and Lyra fought back to back, outnumbered but unbroken. Joran used his rifle as a club. Lyra wielded a stolen shock baton with lethal grace. They took down 3 guards before Vexor activated a neural disruptor, a device that sent searing pain through their nervous systems. They collapsed, writhing. Vexor loomed over Joran. You think your sacrifice means something? Your blood in her veins? It only proves how easily our purity can be corrupted. He raised a dagger. Let me cleanse her. But before he could strike, a voice rang out. Clear, commanding, furious. Enough! The Empress stood in the archway, her face pale with fury. Behind her stood Kales and a dozen loyalist warriors. You lied to me, Vexor, the Empress said, her voice trembling with rage. You used my grief, my fear, to turn me against my own daughter. Joran's breath caught. Daughter? Lyra looked up, stunned. Mother? The Empress's eyes softened for just a moment before hardening again. I should have seen through your poison sooner. She turned to the guards. Seize him. Vexor snarled and lunged. Not at the Empress, but at Lyra. Joran, still weakened, threw himself in the way. The dagger grazed his shoulder, but he tackled Vexor to the ground. Kales stunned him with a pulse round. In the aftermath, the truth unraveled. The Empress embraced Lyra, tears streaming down her face. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid that loving a human would mean losing you to another world. But I see now you've become stronger, wiser. You've shown me that strength isn't in isolation, but in connection. She turned to Joran, studying him with new eyes. You saved my daughter twice, first from death, then from dishonor. She paused. What do you want as reward? Joran looked at Lyra, then back at the Empress. Permission to stay, to stand beside her, not as a human among Varelians, but as a partner. The Empress smiled, a rare, genuine thing. Then let it be so. By royal decree, Commander Joran Vale is granted the title of Sky Warden, protector of the realm, and consort to Princess Lyra of the Azure Fong. Lyra's eyes widened. Princess, you never told him? The Empress chuckled. Oh, my dear, you've been playing soldier so long, you forgot your crown. Laughter bubbled up between them. Relief, joy, disbelief. But their peace was fragile, because as they stood in the heart of the spire, a new transmission crackled over the comms. A distress call from the outer colonies. The Cthar hadn't retreated. They'd regrouped, and they were coming not with armies but with something worse. Prototype. Project Chimera's final form. A hybrid warlord, fused with stolen Varelian biotech and human neural resilience. And at its core, the consciousness of a dead Terran commander, rewired, weaponized, screaming for vengeance. Joran recognized the voice instantly. It was his former CO, Captain Rennick, presumed dead at New Carthage, now a monster wearing his friend's memories. Lyra gripped his hand. We faced this together. Joran nodded, jaw set. Always. Outside, the twin suns set once more over Xyrus 4. But this time they didn't bring darkness. They brought resolve. The final battle did not come with thunderous explosions or fleets clashing in orbit. It came quietly, in the ruins of a forgotten research outpost buried beneath the glass wastes, where Project Chimera had been born, and where it would end. The hybrid warlord that had once been Captain Rennick stood at the heart of the chamber. His body a grotesque fusion of human flesh, Varelian biocircuitry, and Cthar armor, his eyes flickering between rage and sorrow. He recognized Joran the moment they entered. Vale. The voice crackled, half human, half machine. You came to finish me. I came to free you, Joran said, stepping forward, his rifle lowered. Beside him, Lyra held her energy blade ready, but her eyes were filled not with fury, but pity. Rennick laughed, a broken sound. There's nothing left to free. They hollowed me out, used my memories, my grief, my love for my family, turned it all into a weapon. You're wrong, Joran said softly. They used your pain, but they couldn't erase who you were. I remember, you taught me to lead with honor, to protect the helpless. That's still in there. For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Then, Rennick's mechanical limbs twitched. His voice softened. My daughter. She had your eyes, Joran. Big, curious, always asking why. A tear, real, human, slid down his metal cheek. Tell her, I tried to come home. And then, with a surge of will that defied his programming, he triggered the core overload sequence embedded in his chest. "Run!" he shouted. Joran grabbed Lyra's hand and they sprinted from the chamber as the facility collapsed behind them in a silent bloom of blue fire. Chimera's last act of defiance, not destruction, but sacrifice. In the weeks that followed, the Cthar Dominion fractured. Without their secret weapon and with Vexor's treachery exposed, their alliances crumbled. The Varelian Empire, now united under Empress Celera and her newly acknowledged heir, Princess Lyra, forged a historic peace accord with the Terran Alliance. Trade routes opened, cultural exchanges began, and for the first time in centuries, humans and Varelians walked side by side. Not as enemies, not as strangers, but as partners. On the day of the wedding, the twin sons of Xyrus IV rose in perfect alignment, casting golden light over the obsidian spire. The courtyard was filled with guests from both worlds. Terran officers in dress uniforms, Varelian warriors in ceremonial armor woven with living vines, children laughing as they chased bioluminescent moths through the gardens. At the center of it all stood Joran, no longer just a commander, but Sky Warden of the realm, dressed in a blend of Terran formal wear and Varelian silk, his insignia bearing both the eagle and the azure fang. And when Lyra appeared, her blue skin glowing in the sunlight, her golden hair braided with starlight blossoms, her white battle cloak replaced with a gown of liquid silver, he forgot how to breathe. She walked toward him not as a warrior, not as a princess, but as his equal, his partner, his love. The Empress herself presided over the ceremony, her voice strong and warm as she spoke the ancient vows. By sky and sand, by blood and choice, you are bound, not by law, but by will. May your days be long, your laughter louder, and your children many. Cheers erupted as they clasped hands, foreheads touching, tears mingling. Later, under a canopy of floating lanterns, they danced, awkwardly at first, then with growing ease, two souls from different stars learning the same rhythm. Years passed. Their home stood on the edge of the capital, where desert met forest, built with wide windows so their children could watch the twin suns rise. They had two girls with their mother's storm-blue eyes and golden curls, and a boy with Joran's stubborn jaw and a laugh that echoed through the halls. Lyra still trained warriors, but now she taught them compassion alongside combat. Joran served as ambassador, bridging worlds with stories instead of bullets. And every evening, without fail, they walked together through the garden, hand in hand, watching the stars come out. One night, as their youngest daughter slept curled against Joran's chest, Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever regret staying?" He kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of starlight and sand. "Regret? I found my home the day I touched you, and you didn't kill me." She laughed, the sound bright and warm, and squeezed his hand. And in that quiet moment, beneath an alien sky filled with familiar constellations, they knew this was more than a happy ending. It was a beginning that would last forever. Years later, beneath the twin suns of Xyrus IV, Joran and Lyra stood hand in hand on the balcony of their home, watching their children chase luminous sand foxes through the garden. The war was a memory. The scars faded but not forgotten. Their union had sparked an era of peace between humans and Varelians, built on trust forged in fire and sealed with laughter. Lyra still sparred at dawn, though now she taught their daughters balance as much as blade work. Joran wrote letters to Earth, telling stories of blue-skinned queens and desert weddings under alien stars. Every evening, they walked the dunes where they'd first met, the place where fury turned to wonder. They never stopped arguing over tea, hers bitter with root spice, his too sweet, but always shared the last sip. When strangers asked how enemies became lovers, they simply smiled and said, "We chose each other, again and again." And on quiet nights, when the wind carried the scent of heart bloom across the wastes, they held each other close, grateful for every sunrise they'd been given. Together, they had built not just a life, but a legacy written in courage, kindness, and love that defied worlds.